This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm Eleni Eslas from the Suburban Hospitals Community Health and Wellness Department. Thank you for being here this afternoon. Today we have Dr. Andrew Wong and Sean Rose, who will be discussing with us CBD. What is it? Where to start? What is it used for? What are the benefits? Is there a risk? Well, I have lots of questions, and I'm sure you do too. So we decided to have them come today and talk to us about CBD and the many uses of it. Before we begin, I wanted to just do a few housekeeping items. One of them is this meeting is being recorded and we'll make it available to you within the coming days. Secondly, to have your questions answered by our panel, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer those questions at the end of the program, of the presentation. And finally, at the end of the program, we're going to send out, I'll send an evaluation link. Please take the time to fill out the evaluation. We love to hear your thoughts, what you find useful, what you didn't find useful, any recommendations, suggestions for future topics. So please take a moment and complete that evaluation link. Finally, thank you very much for being here, Sean and Dr. Wong. I appreciate your time this afternoon, and I hope that you will also find it as beneficial as I will. So we'll get started right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eleni. I think that we should just do, maybe Sean, we should do a little brief intro so kind of people know who we are. I will start since I would do that, get that done first. I'm Dr. Wong. I'm a integrative primary care doctor, so I'm board certified in internal medicine. Did my training at Tufts and Georgetown and did an integrative fellowship in Arizona, and also have some experience in medical acupuncture. So I've kind of looked at things over my career in terms of kind of not necessarily conventional versus alternative, but more like what's the best way I can be of service to patients, you know. And I think that's kind of where I came across, you know, CBD at some point in my, you know, journey of exploration of all this. And I would say that, you know, meeting Sean, I think he's the real expert here in CBD. I can give you my thoughts during this presentation of sort of how I would see this, you know, clinically, like in a medical clinic, and kind of how I would see it with patients. But and then I think I would say otherwise, I think it is very useful for a lot of conditions. So we're going to get into that, and I'm going to turn it over to Sean here.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to say thank you to Eleni for hosting this, and thank you to Dr. Wong for inviting me to speak today. I really appreciate it. So yeah, today we're going to talk about CBD, what it is, where to start, and to introduce myself, I did put a little slide here. So my name is Sean Rose. I have a master's degree in clinical herbal medicine from the Maryland University of Integrative Health. I am not a doctor. However, I am what you may call a clinical herbalist. So I basically, effectively, it's like being a health and wellness coach, except I use herbs as my tools to help support your health with basic nutritional dietary advice and lifestyle advice as well. And I'm also a death doula, which I explained to Eleni earlier before the call. Effectively, I just kind of like help people with the process of death, which is very rewarding work, very little depressing sometimes, but you know, it's just good work that needs to be done. So those are the kind of things that I do. I'm also the co-founder of Strobe Apothecary, which is a bulk herb custom formulating apothecary in Crofton, Maryland. And I'm also the director of my clinical services business, which is Tenderhearted Wellness. So I do have a background in cannabis, the cannabis industry, the medical industry here in Maryland in particular. So that's where I really got started learning about CBD, learning about medical cannabis in all its different forms. And I've also worked quite a bit in wellness departments, Mom's Organic Market, things like that. So I've been working with CBD for quite a while, and it's honestly just kind of exploding right now, especially in Maryland. I believe that like the recreational market will be launching in July. So there's just a lot of stuff happening. There's a lot of new cannabinoids on the market today. We'll briefly touch on those, but for the most part, today we're going to be talking about CBD. So I'll go ahead and get started here. So I just wanted to start with what is CBD? So CBD is a cannabinoid. That means that it interacts with the endocannabinoid system, which is a system in the body that not a lot of people know too much about. It was discovered a few decades ago, and effectively it's a system of chemical messengers. Your body creates these things called endocannabinoids, which just mean they're cannabinoids that your body produces. And those chemicals interact with a system of receptors that are present throughout the body. Not to get too far into it, but there's a few different kinds of these receptors, and each of the cannabinoids that we know will sort of interact with one of them, or otherwise, increase bioavailability of other compounds. So CBD in particular is one of these cannabinoids that the cannabis plant itself produces, and that is cannabis in general. Cannabis, known as hemp, is typically what we would refer to. A cannabis plant that has CBD, we would use the word hemp. And then, THC-rich varieties are typically referred to as marijuana or medical cannabis or something like that. They really are the same plant, and they're extremely closely related if they are not even the same species. So very, very similar there. So like I said, this is cannabidiol. CBD that's the long version of it. So CBD works in the body by, it's sort of indirect. It doesn't directly activate or work with any of the receptors themselves. What it does is it actually inhibits an enzyme that stops your endocannabinoid production. So there's a couple of endocannabinoids that are really important. One of the most important ones being anandamide, which you may also have heard of as the bliss chemical. It's similar to an endorphin, but it is not an endorphin. Endorphins typically work through opioid receptors, whereas this one will work through cannabinoid receptors. So effectively, it inhibits an enzyme that stops this endocannabinoid production, which makes more endocannabinoids available to your cannabinoid receptors. What that means effectively is it lets there be more endocannabinoids in your body, thereby making it much more easy for those chemicals to find their way to the receptors in your body. And many of the receptors in the endocannabinoid system work by encouraging or regulating what we might call homeostasis. It effectively helps your body manage temperature, hunger levels, sleepiness, all sorts of different things. So we're still really learning about this system, learning about what it can do, and we're still learning about how cannabis products can interact with it. So why should you take CBD? Well, first of all, I have to say, of course, this presentation is just for educational purposes. So I'm not going to tell you whether you should or should not take it. You should talk to your healthcare provider, please. But if you are interested in taking it, some of the benefits might include helping to regulate inflammation in the body, helping to mitigate some effects of stress on the body. It can aid in deep sleep. It can promote feelings of calm and relaxation. It can promote good joint health. It can aid in mobility. It acts as a neuroprotective, so it can help protect the nerves and the brain from any sort of damage, or otherwise will help them function correctly. And it may also aid in tremors. There are many people who take CBD in rather large doses to help manage symptoms of diseases such as Parkinson's or epilepsy. It won't work with every type of epilepsy. This is really where I have to tell you to go talk to your neurologist or your PCP and just see if it might be an option for you or for helping you manage any of these things. So there's many different ways to take CBD. Many of you are probably familiar with CBD oil, which would sometimes it's referred to as a tincture as well, like a CBD tincture. But that it's basically, just an oil extraction. There's several different ways for those to actually be made. We'll talk a little bit about that, but to avoid kind of overcomplication, we're just gonna kind of brush over that. Effectively, it's just important to know that you can get it in an oil like dropper form. I like this form because it's easy to dose, and it's easy to modify the dose too. So there's some cases where you might want to take maybe like a smaller dose during the day, but at night you want maybe to take a larger dose to sleep better. Again, for specific dosing, please talk to your healthcare practitioner, but I like the oil because you can kind of use a range of doses. Makes it much easier to do that. They also do have some CBD teas and hemp teas available. You have to be careful about these because cannabinoids in general, including CBD, are not actually solvent in water. So it's much harder to actually get the actual CBD chemical into a tea. There are some brands that have a proprietary process where they modify the molecule in a way that allows it to get into the water. The only brand that I know off the top of my head that does that is Buddha Teas, but there may be others available on the market. Gummies are another great way. Of course, there will be some sugar content associated with that, so just be careful if that's a problem for you. But gummies are pretty good just because they will be a very specific dose. So if you're looking for a 5 milligram dose or a 10 milligram dose or a 15 milligram dose, sometimes you can find gummies that have that specific dosage. So it makes it a little easier to make sure that you're taking the same amount every time. Capsules are also around. I don't know if there's many like in the wellness departments that I've visited, but there may be some. So that might be something to check on if you'd prefer to take things that way. Topical lotions, salves, and creams. Those are really awesome, especially if you have localized pain or inflammation in any particular part of your body. I really like them for joints. I personally have like a shoulder injury that I use CBD cream, a salve on actually all the time. And the other cool thing about these salves in particular is oftentimes they're combined with other herbs to increase their effect. So we sell a particular one at my apothecary that uses a lot of cooling herbs, or herbs, as herbalists would refer to them, we would refer to them as cooling. So they're really great for kind of sharp stabbing pain. Whereas something with like more dull, achy pain would be better if there was like a cayenne or some sort of warming, heating aspect to that salve. So you can kind of customize your experience based on what your particular needs are. And there are also some sprays, and honestly, there's just a bajillion ways. You can also nowadays, you can get the actual hemp flower, which looks like marijuana, looks like cannabis, because it basically is the same thing, just with CBD, no THC, or below the legal limit of THC anyway. And you can make your own infusions and cook, you can make brownies, or you can make cookies or like these little nut butter ball things up here are a pretty good way to get those in. That does require a little bit more know-how, a little bit more cooking ability, or you have to make sure that you're doing that at the correct temperature. So if you have any questions about that, I would say get someone who can guide you, or try to talk to someone who can direct you to like a good recipe or something like that. So there are very few risks associated with CBD. There are some, so you just have to be careful. Most of these risks are associated with too large of a dose. So with cannabis in general, no matter what the cannabinoid is that you're working with, but especially for CBD, the recommendation really is to start low and slow. Start with a very small dose, because you can always go up from there. Going down is a little bit more tough because your body will kind of form a tolerance to CBD if you are taking too much of it. So it's always best to use what we would call like the lowest or minimum effective dose. Use the smallest dose that helps you with what you need help with. So the first kind of risk or side effect that could be associated with it would be drowsiness or fatigue, as you can see by my little friend here, the sleepy puppy on the couch. By the way, dogs can take CBD, just really you have to make sure that it is kind of a pure CBD oil. It can really help with aging dogs. It can help with their joints and their mobility. And can also, I have seen it also help with like separation anxiety with dogs as well. Cats, you have to be a little bit more careful with. So please, consult a veterinary practitioner before working with that, with cats especially. So you may feel drowsy or fatigued if you take too much of it. Sometimes there's nausea associated with it. In my experience, I personally have never felt any sort of nausea, but there have been reports of that happening. Dry mouth is kind of, unfortunately, a side effect of most cannabis products, because cannabis is what herbalists would refer to as a drying herb. It kind of like removes fluids from the system. So dry mouth is a possibility, but again, that really should only be an issue if you're taking like way too much. And the one thing that I really want to stress is that it may interact with some pharmaceutical medications. There are some documented effects or documented interactions, including especially like if you're on like blood thinners, for instance. You might just want to be super careful. If you're going to take CBD, be super careful about the dose. Really work with your healthcare provider. The timing of the dose may also be important. Sometimes you can take pharmaceutical medications offset from another supplement such as CBD by a few hours, and that makes it a little bit safer. But again, please, please, please consult your healthcare provider before taking CBD, especially in large doses, if you are on pharmaceutical medications. I would also say that the more medications you're on, the more risk of interactions there are. So just really be mindful when you're working with these things. And I would also advise just be mindful when you're working with almost any herbal supplement if you are on pharmaceutical medications, because there are many herbs that will mess with the bioavailability of the pharmaceutical medications, or otherwise kind of cause problems. And we don't want to do that. We want to make sure if you're on those medications that they are working as best as they can. So I'm going to end my presentation with a few frequently asked questions. These are basically just a few little questions that I get pretty often when I'm talking about CBD with people. So let's see. Our first one is, how do I choose? How do I choose the correct product for me? How do I choose, even what type of preparation to use? So I would say, first and foremost, if you're really just getting into this, just now getting into CBD and starting to understand what it is, I would first work with a known company, an established company that has, years of sourcing experience and years of processing experience. So two of the ones that I know just off the top of my head that are just really awesome companies would be Charlotte's Web and CV Sciences. These two companies have actually been around since before the Farm Bill was passed that allowed or that legalized industrial hemp production. So CV Sciences, I know in particular, works with Dutch growers, if I'm not mistaken, unless that's changed in the past few years. Charlotte's Web, I'm not sure exactly which growers they work with, but they have been around for a very, very long time as well. And they have good products. You can typically find them at, wellness departments. If you have like a Mom's Organic Market near you, that's the place that I know in particular. They will typically carry both of these, as well as a select few other brands. A note on moms in general is that I happen to personally know their wellness coordinator, and they are very, very, very hardcore on making sure that their products are well sourced. So that's generally just a good place to go. They train their employees very well to talk about these products. So if you have any questions, please, please, please go to your wellness department and ask questions. Make sure, especially these days, that you're getting a product that only has CBD in it, if that's what you're going for. There are now products on the market that have another cannabinoid called CBG in them, which is also good, but maybe not one that you need. So it's just important really just to ask a lot of questions. My other guidance would be to look for full spectrum extracts where you can. Full spectrum really just means that it's getting, like, the extraction process is actually taking out a pretty good representation of the phytochemicals contained within that plant. So what that means is that the CBD is not alone. There are some products that are what we would call distillates. Basically, those are made with purified CBD, like it is just CBD, nothing else. I personally prefer full spectrum extracts because they will contain other parts of the plant or other chemicals that the plant produces, such as terpenes, which are volatile oils or what you might know as essential oils. So those actually also have medicinal effect on the body, and they work with the CBD together in an effect known as the entourage effect. You can read more about that if you just search it online, entourage effect. But effectively what it means is that these terpenes and other chemicals help the CBD function better. There are lots of people who have tried CBD, or they've tried like a pure CBD distillate product with no other terpenes in it, no other anything in it, and they usually report that it doesn't work. And I'm not going to say that it won't work for everybody, but for a lot of people, they basically feel nothing when they're dealing with just a pure, just CBD only product. So look for full spectrum extracts where you can. And if you can't get it in a full spectrum extract, there are other ways to get those terpenes and such as working with other herbs in particular as well. So that's where you talk to your local herbalist. That's where I come in. All right, this is a very popular question here. Will I get high? No, CBD does not cause a psychoactive high. The legal limit for THC, which is the more psychoactive euphoric chemical in cannabis, is 0.3%. So a product must contain less than 0.3% THC to be sold on regular store shelves. If it contains more than that, then it must be sold at a dispensary. So you are you have very, very extremely little risk of feeling any sort of high when you're taking a CBD product from just a regular store. Now, you may feel more relaxed, you may feel more calm. It does have psychoactive effects in that way, as in it just kind of affects the mind by calming it down, reduces some nervousness, but no sort of euphoric psychoactive effect. So just make sure, again, to take care when you're purchasing, ask lots of questions, and to make sure that ask a lot of questions to make sure that you know exactly what you're going to buy. Nowadays, depending on where you go, there are like little CBD stores. I live in Baltimore. There's like 2 or 3 of them, maybe even more, just within like a mile radius of my home. These are great places to go, but they are also going to be selling products that contain Delta 8 THC, which is a modified type of THC that can feel kind of high. It's a little bit different from the Delta 9 that we would typically think of as THC. But you want to make sure that you're not getting a product with Delta 8 THC in it if you don't want that. So make sure, again, just to ask lots of questions. Does this contain any Delta 8 THC? Does this contain other cannabinoids besides CBD? What are the effects of those cannabinoids? Will this product make me feel high? Those are things that you would ask to make sure that you're getting, just a good product for you. And I'm also going to say, just in general, like if you're going to a well-known shop or store, again, like a Mom's Organic Market or something like that, that deals with a lot of these things, typically those stores are not going to be selling Delta 8 THC or anything that will make you high. It's honestly kind of a liability, I would think, for them. So you're probably a little bit safer going to like a larger kind of shop like that if you're nervous. And another frequently asked question would be, is it addictive? So they've done lots of studies specifically on CBD, and the studies are showing that there's very little risk of physical or mental dependence or withdrawal symptoms associated with CBD use. I would almost say, and I'm just going to say I have no scientific evidence with me in my hand to make this claim necessarily, but I would almost call CBD anti-addictive, possibly. It can really help regulate the nervous system. A lot of addictive urges are kind of impulses or, basically it's someone trying to medicate themselves, trying to get some sort of psychological need met or physical need. That's a typical addictive process, and CBD can kind of like calm down a lot of that signaling. I'm not going to say that it will cure you of an addiction, but it probably will help you fight, any sort of impulsive urge to engage in any sort of addictive chemical use or anything like that. CBD also, just because of the way that it works, it floods your system with endocannabinoids, cannabinoids that your body produces. So it actually, in a way, inhibits THC and other cannabinoids that might be going into your body from interacting with those receptors. So it can actually reduce a lot of the negative symptoms associated with too much THC use, because there are definitely negative symptoms associated with too much THC use. So CBD basically can help when dosed properly with addiction, or it can help kind of calm those urges down or calm that need down. So I would say it's actually the opposite of addictive, personally. And if you need more support, there's a few different kind of websites that you can go to for more information. Leafly.com is one of my favorite kind of beginner resources for cannabis of all kinds. They deal with medical cannabis as well as hemp. And And oftentimes, if you just do like a Google search, like Leafly CBD, Leafly CBG, Leafly THC, or whatever, they will very often have an article already written up on the subject, kind of explaining basically what that cannabinoid is. They also have several terpene articles as well. So as you become a little bit more familiar with looking at testing sheets, looking at testing loadouts for CBD products, oftentimes they will include like a little QR code or something for you to look at so that you can see the actual product testing. If you have questions about any of those chemicals that you're seeing, you can go to leafly.com, and often, like I said, there will be an article on it that kind of explains what it is and what it does. So that can be a great resource for understanding CBD products, but also medical cannabis or THC-rich cannabis. There's also projectcbd.org. This is a site that I haven't really been on too much myself, but I was looking at it earlier, and it seems to have some really great information, just kind of explaining what CBD is and how it can be helpful for people. And then healer.com is a website. It's a company operated by Dr. Dustin Sulak, who is one of the forefront kind of like CBD/cannabis doctors in the country right now. So that's his website. He has a couple of kind of webinar style videos. I've learned a great deal about CBD from him, such as one of the webinars I watched, he was talking about how CBD has many heart protective benefits. So that was something that I had never heard before, and I learned that directly from a webinar at healer.com. You can also choose to work directly with practitioners who can help you. So I listed my website there, tenderhearted.love. That's my wellness practice. I do clinical herbal therapy, so you can get help with other herbs. But if you really are just interested in cannabis, you can also sign up for a medical cannabis advising appointment with me there. And of course, our good friends at Capital Integrative Health, Dr. Wong, and his associates. Many of them are just very, very talented doctors and clinicians. So they're also a great place to start if you have questions, especially if you have questions about working with CBD or other cannabinoids in addition to pharmaceutical medications, which of course I as a doctor cannot advise on. So that is my presentation for today. And I just want to thank everyone for taking a minute to listen to me talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sean. I appreciate it. I think you answered all the questions I had today. Dr. Wong, do you want to say a few things about CBD oil that you've seen in your practice with your patients?
Yes,
thank you. On what? Yeah,
Eleni, yes, and that's a great presentation, Sean. I think for any like deep questions about CBD, I will ask Sean. One thing that we do in our practice, just to let people know, is if people are looking for, say, a medical cannabis card. So Maryland has this Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission, or MMCC, website that you can apply for a card, and you would have to get that sort of approved or recommended by a medical practitioner. That could be a medical doctor, could be a nurse practitioner, could be a dentist as well. Usually this is given for things like chronic pain and anorexia, and there's like probably 8 or 9 conditions they list there that would fulfill a kind of a diagnosis, so to speak. But medical cannabis is not a prescription, it's more of a recommendation. So what you would typically do is get a card, go to the dispensary. If you want more, additional knowledge and a consult from a talented clinical herbalist like Sean, you would see him in consultation. You would go to the dispensary, and then you would pick out a product or products, plural. In my clinical practice, I use CBD a lot to reduce inflammation. So one of the things that happens is people get tight muscles, they get tight joints, things like that. So there are topical versions of CBD with different strengths. So that's a pretty simple one. And then we often use it for sleep because CBD does activate the GABA which is a GABA-aminobutyric acid, which is a very calming brain chemical that kind of helps maintain sleep, along with another amino acid called glycine. So there is a lot of use for CBD for sleep, and also because it also activates GABA, which is a calming neurochemical. If you think about people that have, say, anxiety, whether it's acute anxiety, situational anxiety, or chronic anxiety, CBD is great for anxiety as well. So like Sean said, it kind of calms down that system, so you can kind of take a deep breath and kind of recalibrate yourself, right? So it's not gonna be as strong as like a Xanax or something like that. But we also don't want to necessarily pummel our bodies with Xanax all the time, right? We want to actually take some deep breaths, kind of reorient ourselves, and herbs can be a really gentle and safe way to kind of re-enter our bodies that way. And then I think the other reason would be if someone had sort of a chronic inflammatory condition. It could be something like autoimmune condition. We use a lot of low-dose CBD for that. Because again, the immune system, when in an autoimmune condition, it's going to be sort of overactivated. So a lot of people with autoimmune conditions, sometimes they have a weak immune system, but sometimes it's overactivated. It's like too much, like a boxer that keeps on punching, right? You don't want to keep on punching, right? You want to kind of punch a little bit and then kind of like rest. So this idea of CBD can help to balance the nervous system that way, can be helpful. So I think those are some of the conditions. There's probably other ones. The one thing I want to say about pharmaceuticals, I should chime in on that. I agree with Sean. I think it's very safe. I think there's not a lot of, studies about, which dose is the safest or not. Maybe Sean, you could comment on that. I think it is very hard to overdose on CBD, but it's possible to have too much for an individual body. There is a system that I think we should mention called the drug metabolism system. So there is a system called cytochrome P450, which are basically liver enzymes that help to process drugs. They help to process hormones. They help to process a lot of things in our liver and kind of detox everything that comes into our bodies. So 3A4 is a specific enzyme. It's called cytochrome P450 3A4 that will often could interact with certain medications if those medications also are considered, quote unquote, as substrate for that enzyme system. So I think the three for people to remember here would be warfarin, also known as Coumadin, which is a blood thinner that I think is still used for like atrial fibrillation or different things. And then I think also thyroid medication, a lot of people are on Synthroid or levothyroxine. In theory, CBD actually helps to promote the endogenous, meaning internal production of thyroid hormones. That patient or that person might actually eventually need less thyroid hormone medication if they were on CBD. Again, I think these things are not dangerous necessarily, but you need to talk to your provider about it so they know that, hey, they're on these medications or they're on these supplements or herbals, because we kind of look at things in integrative health as the meds and the drugs and stuff, and then the supplements and herbs, they're all an equal footing to the body. The body doesn't care if they're medications or herbs, right? They just have a biological effect. So your doctor, your practitioner that you're seeing as a patient, let's say, they need to know about all these things. And if they don't know the answer, they can consult us. They can talk to Sean, about different things from a dosing perspective. So I'd say warfarin, thyroid, and then the biggest one's probably statins. So statins are medications that are used to lower blood cholesterol, which is, they're very commonly used and, one of the top selling drugs. So I think that statins do have their use, obviously, but that is going to be something where a lot of times, a lot of these, if a herb or a substance is going to affect the 3A4 system, it might raise the level of the statin, in which case you want to either lower that dose or at least have your practitioner check on your cholesterol levels, check on your liver enzymes and stuff like that. So this is probably relevant after you get up to a certain dose. I think it's not really clear how much. I'll just say in general, not this is medical advice, but generally I would say, for me anyway, a moderate dose of things or like a very not too high dose would be like 25 milligrams, 50 milligrams of CBD. I'm not sure, Sean, where you are with that, but I would say those are the three things on the pharmaceutical side. But in general, very, very beneficial to people. I'll say one more thing, and then we'll maybe have more discussion from our listeners, is that the endocannabinoid system, or the EC system, is really the body's ultimate stress response system. And in integrative health, we talk a lot about, and we still talk a lot about, the adrenal system. The adrenal system produces cortisol and DHEA, and it helps us to manage stress, to do our jobs, and be productive, but also to recover. So all those things are cortisol and DHEA. But like Sean said, in the 1990s, the endocannabinoid system was discovered, and it's now thought that the EC system is more ancient than the adrenal system, and in a way it might turn out to be more important in terms of managing stress. So if we think about why people might have a low level of endocannabinoids, it's going to be from chronic physical stress. It's going to be from chronic psychological stress, right? Just the stress of COVID, the stress of being, isolated, or, getting routines messed up. So I think when you think about it from a very holistic global perspective, it's really, really important to look at the health of that endocannabinoid system. What are some ways you can increase that? I think we need to go towards, a very holistic view of things: meditation, acupuncture, things that bring you joy in life, things that bring you pleasure, joy, purpose. That's going to increase your EC system, right? So you can use the herbs along with that to activate your body, so that you can then live a more fulfilling and quality life. So yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. And I don't think too many practitioners talk about living that integrated life that you mentioned, stopping and appreciating life, and having, as you just mentioned. So I thank you for saying that. I'm going to ask, so that we have a few questions here. One person writes, I take CBD oil under my tongue at night and sometimes get heartburn or a burning sensation in my throat. How can I avoid this effect?
That's a good question. I would say, so from an energetic perspective, we're working with cannabis. Now, I don't have time to really teach everyone about how energetics work in herbalism. It's basically the way that we diagnose, since we cannot diagnose within the disease model. Effectively, everything, including our bodies, including all these herbs, have properties to them. They are either drying or moistening, or they are warming or cooling, or they are tensing or relaxing. So that's kind of just the way to kind of look at it. So cannabis is definitely a warming, drying herb, even in an oil form. So there may be some sort of possibly irritation happening in the throat of this particular person. My recommendation personally would be to maybe explore working with moistening herbs such as marshmallow root or flax seed or chia seed or oat, even like oatmeal, possibly to help the mucous membranes recover a little bit. That might reduce it, but again, I can't really give super personalized health advice, but might be an option to explore.
Okay, well, thank you.
Sorry, one little addition to that is do not take CBD with alcohol, right? Alcohol gives people heartburn and reflux. CBD interacts with alcohol, so that's not a good combination. So if you're going to have your nightcap, don't have your CBD, choose one or the other. You use the CBD as a nightcap instead. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
This person they got the version that's THC free. What would be the change? I guess what was the difference if there's CBD oil with THC, and then there's CBD without?
Does that mean they're taking out? It's like totally 0% at that point, or? Sean?
Probably, yeah. I believe that there are products on the market that are considered entirely THC free, as in they have processed all of the THC out of it. Like I said, there is a legal limit to hemp products of 0.3%. So products on grocery store shelves or wellness market shelves can contain up to 0.3% CBD, and that is legally allowed. So if you're getting something that says THC free, I'm assuming that it means that it has absolutely zero THC in it, which is particularly good for people who are maybe worried about testing. People in the military very often are very hesitant to work with CBD products because of even the like super slight chance that you may possibly test positive for THC. Generally, if you're working with a CBD product on the market, even the ones with 0.3% in it, you probably will not trigger a test. Yeah, and then as far as like efficacy, there may be some differences in efficacy too between a product that contains a little bit of THC versus one that contains zero. A little bit of THC actually really helps that CBD work and helps you feel the effects of the CBD more, even at that tiny, tiny, tiny amount. So if you go to the dispensary, you can find products that have, like, for instance, equal amounts of THC and CBD, which we would call a one-to-one. A one-to-one will have, certain effects. Like, for instance, it may be better for helping people sleep than just a pure CBD alone. Again, that's something that can kind of be modified with dosing strategies and things like that. I hope that answers the question. I assume that a THC-free product has zero, but I'd have to look at the product itself to really know for sure.
Okay. That brings me to another question. Is CBD oil safe for, you mentioned pets, but is it safe for children as well? Is that where this TH free would come?
Yeah, I would say yes, it is very safe for children. Again, I think the dosage is really what we need to hammer in on here. What Dr. Wong mentioned earlier was like the 25 to 50 milligram range. That's a great range typically for someone who needs to sleep, but that would be like an adult body. Most of the time when I'm working with clients, I start them off even as low as 2.5 milligrams or 5 milligrams, depending on how sensitive they are, what else the product has in it. If it has some THC, in it, then we might go lower. And again, I just like to say, go low and slow anyway. So with a child in particular, first of all, they make like flavored CBD oils that are like peppermint flavored, much better than a non-flavored one. And children can typically take those in kind of smaller amounts. I would start them off at the 1 to 2.5 milligram range and then try, over a few days and see what works. It really depends, of course, on what that child is dealing with.
Thank you. Okay, we have a comment about sleep. So for sleep, it does help with waking up in the middle of the night and having difficulty getting back to sleep. And the participant says, I don't have trouble falling asleep initially. So I guess this brings me to a question I had, which would be the difference between, so some people take melatonin to fall asleep, right? So melatonin is naturally found in the body. So is it kind of a similar effect, or is it similar? Could you use CBD not necessarily in addition to, but as a substitute for melatonin?
Dr. Wong, do you have something to say?
Yeah. Sorry. Let me take one comment on that. Melatonin is typically a hormone that rises around dusk. When things are kind of amber in the sky. And your body's kind of getting ready for sleep. That cortisol level is going to drop, which is an adrenal hormone, and then the melatonin level is going to rise. So it's kind of like, it becomes, sunlight becomes moonlight and firelight and that kind of thing. So then the melatonin goes up. So we kind of look at in our clinic, like sleep onset being a melatonin type of process, whereas sleep maintenance is more of a GABA type of process. So when you look at it from that perspective, you can combine them. And in fact, I combine them sometimes myself. Melatonin is used for sleep onset, whereas I would use CBD for sleep maintenance in general.
I would definitely agree with that, especially since it interacts with that GABA system, and GABA is really implicated in the sleeping process and even the dreaming process and things like that. CBD could be used in addition to melatonin. Melatonin would help you get to sleep. I do advise personally that you don't take too much melatonin if you can avoid it, just because your body can build up a tolerance and it eventually stops working for people. But you could take some CBD like in addition. The other thing that I like to recommend for people is to keep some CBD oil by their bedside. So if they do wake up, they can actually take that rather easily and help calm their bodies back down to go to sleep. I feel very much for my friends that have trouble sleeping through the night, because that is often a little bit more difficult to handle than sleep onset itself.
Thank you. Okay. I just started taking CBD gummies for sleep. 25 milligrams CBD per gummy. Is this dose considered moderate? Also, it contains 10 milligrams of
Hydroxytryptophan, sorry.
Yeah, that's it. 5-HTP. Thank you, Dr. Wong. Can you explain what that is?
I think Sean can speak to the dosing. I think for the 5-hydroxytryptophan, that is a precursor to serotonin, and serotonin actually turns into melatonin. So it is another way to help with sleep onset.
Yeah, definitely on the 5-HTP front. I think I haven't worked with it very much, but I know it's a precursor to the serotonin, and then the serotonin eventually breaks down into melatonin, so can help with some sleep onset there. As far as if the dose is considered moderate, I would say that that's a good dose to start on if you're trying to sleep. You do kind of typically want a heavier dose toward the higher range if you are trying to sleep. I would advise feeling it out. CBD is, as many herbs are too, you can kind of modulate the dosing based on how you feel. So if you are waking up in the morning and you feel kind of like a hangover or like a sluggishness or like a fatigue or something upon waking up, then chances are that dose is a little too high. And what you could do is maybe take half the gummy instead. Just bite it in half and save the other half for tomorrow night. But if you find that it's helping you sleep and you're waking up feeling rested and relaxed and, not sluggish or hungover or any sort of thing like that, then I would say that that's a good dose for you. And also keep in mind that your body does, again, build some tolerance to CBD over time. So it is possible that you may need to go up in dose eventually. So the other reason that I even mentioned going low and slow to start with and really like starting out that way is because we want you to always get the effectiveness that you need at the smallest dose so that you're not hammering yourself with too much cannabinoid, too much CBD, which would then build your tolerance, and then you have to take more, and it, kind of turns into a mess.
Great. We don't want to mess.
No.
No. So I think you talked about the benefits, but what are the benefits? What benefits does CBD use? What are the benefits for CBD for joint pain and arthritis?
My understanding is that CBD interacts with a lot with the CB2 or cannabidiol 2 receptor, which would be anti-inflammatory. Sean, do you have any other thoughts about it?
So technically, CBD does not interact with either of the CB receptors.
The mechanism you were saying, yeah.
Yes, it was thought for a very
Okay.
long time that it
Okay.
operates on the CB2 receptors. More what it does is increases the amount of endocannabinoids available, and those endocannabinoids are naturally anti-inflammatory. They are what your body releases to help modulate the inflammatory processes in the body. So oftentimes for joint pain and arthritis, well, I can kind of speak from my own experience here. Like when I got my shoulder injury, what I would do would be to take, I kind of started with really big doses because I didn't know what I was doing back then. But it really helped my joints feel almost, it was kind of like the Tin Man, you know, like getting the oil. That's kind of what it felt like. It just kind of helped lube it up, kind of helped everything move a little bit better with a little bit less pain. And it really just, you know, it doesn't take it away entirely, especially if you're just doing a pure CBD product. But yeah, it effectively just helps your body's natural inflammatory processes work better. If you do want to interact with CB2 receptors, though, and reduce inflammation that way, a great terpene to look out for is one called beta caryophyllene, which you don't need to remember that word. Just remember it's in black pepper. So if you're taking fresh ground black pepper a little bit every day in your food and taking your CBD and taking your omega-3 fatty acids, which are then turned into endocannabinoids in the body, you're doing a couple different things. You can kind of help really regulate those inflammatory processes.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. So you're putting like food and food as medicine.
Thy food be thy
Thank you.
medicine.
So like a piece of salmon with black pepper and a side of CBD oil.
There you go. In
There
fact,
you go.
yeah, I love that.
That's awesome.
We use CBD oil in the like dressing for it or something. Yeah, I love that.
But you, okay, so wait, now I just thought like, so you can't necessarily like cook with CBD oil. Like you wouldn't like want to put, but
No.
you would definitely like just a drop, maybe like in your dressing or something, right?
Yeah, honestly, one of my favorite ways to work with it with people is, you know, if they're doing like a salad dressing or some sort of dressing that would go on top of like a fish or something like that, you can put your CBD oil into like, you know, you have our olive oil, CBD oil, mix it up with any spices or whatever, vinegar, you know, whatever you want. You can put that directly on some food. I would not cook with it. If you are cooking with it, do it at a very, very low temperature, sub 180 degrees, just as to not destroy the cannabinoids.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you. That's a great point. I always just love talking about food. So it's very natural for me to get back to food. So if there are no other questions, I want to thank you, Sean and Dr. Wong, for being here today. I have learned so much. This has been very informative and insightful. And I hope that everyone else has. So this is like, if there's any last questions, please write them now or forever, hold your peace. But Sean, if I do get some folks who have further questions, may I share your contact information? Okay.
Sure.
As well with Dr. Wong. Absolutely. Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being here today. I appreciate it. I appreciate Dr. Wong and Sean for being here as well. Thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, Lainey. Good to see everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for coming.